Hi, I'm Jeff Sengstack, the lead instructor here at blueeffects.net. And I'm going to show you how to work with the Parallax Memories template. Let's just take a look at what's inside the Parallax Memories template folder. If you've unzipped it, you look at it like this, and you've got these assets. We have 4 subfolders here. All these assets work within the template. You don't need to change these. Then we have the After Effects project file, the AEP file, and a README text file that we'll talk about later. All right, let's start up After Effects by double-clicking the icon here. You could also double-click the project file, but I want to go this sort of indirect route here. Now you will probably see this splash screen here, and you can open up a project this way, but I'm going to close this down to show you another way to open up a project. So click on the X here, and now go to File, Open Project, and go to the place where you have that folder. It's on my desktop. There's Parallax Memories. Double-click on that, and double-click here on the project file. Now if you're working with a version of After Effects made after the CS6 version, then you're going to get a message like this. I'm working with the version that was released in 2016. It's called the 2015.3 version. And this just tells you that it's going to be converted from that older version to a newer version, and that's just fine. You can click OK and go ahead. If you have the CS6 version, you won't see this. If you have a version that came out before CS6, this won't open in it. So you have to have After Effects CS6 or newer to open up this template. So click on OK. That brings in all of the assets. And if you look at the top here, it says Parallax Memories Converted. And that's the name that will be applied automatically if you save this. But I think it's best to save it under a different name because you want to save it relative to the thing that you're working on. So go up to File and go File, Save As. Click on that again, Save As. And give it a name, something other than Parallax Memories by itself like that. I'm going to go back to my desktop here. I'm going to call this Parallax Memories Photos, just to differentiate it from the original template file like that. All right. So now let's just take a little tour here. This is the main comp, the main composition. And you see these little markers here. That just shows you where each placeholder will be for the media. There are 20 placeholders here. This template is oriented to working with 20 images. You probably don't want to work with video here, although you can, but it's a very slow process when you want to render this out as a file, as a video file. So it's best to work with images in this particular template because there's so much 3D animation going on here. So there are 20 placeholders. If you have fewer than 20 images, then it's best to use images 2 or 3 times if you need to fill out all 20 placeholders rather than just do, let's say, 10 of them and have a bunch of blank places. So you want to fill up all 20 placeholders. If you have more than 20 images, I'll show you how to deal with that a little bit later. The reason we have these markers is so you can navigate through this relatively easily. With the timeline active like this, with the blue line around it like that, press the J or the K keys to go through here. K goes forward 1 marker at a time, like that. And then J goes back, like so. So you see all these placeholders here where you're going to put media. You're also noticing some effects as we go along here. You notice how the text kind of angles back. That's why this is called parallax. Parallax means that things in the distance look smaller and move slower relative to where you're standing, and things close to you appear larger and move faster. So we have these little particles here, these little snow particles to imply the parallax feeling, and the text angles back like that. And we have these 2 things on the side that also angle back to give a feel of parallax. And the images, when we bring them in here, also animate and come toward the camera. So again, it's part of this parallax feeling as you go through here. All right, so the first order of business now is to bring in your media, bring in your images. And to do that, you import them. Now you can go to File, Import, and that's one way to bring in your assets. But an easier way to do this is just to double-click here inside an empty space inside the project panel. So do that. And I have these images for my tutorial here on the desktop. If I double-click that, there are only 5 here because I'm not going to put all 20 images in. I just want to show you how to do this. And I could select these things individually by clicking on one and Control or Command clicking on other ones to select individual files. Or I could select all of them by clicking and dragging a marquee like that. But a better way to select all of them is to select the folder. So back up 1 notch here to the desktop. And with that folder active, I can click on Import Folder. It's a much easier way to bring in a whole bunch of stuff if you've organized it into a folder. And that adds this little folder here inside the project panel with those 5 images right there inside it. A much better way to do it. It's really organized nicely that way. I want to place these images inside the media placeholders here. So I'm going to put this back to media 1 here by just dragging the current time indicator over to number 1. And now I need to open up things that I can change. Now if you look at the project panel, you'll see how it's organized. We have assets here. That looks like the asset folders you had inside the desktop, with the exception of adding a solids folder, which is something we work with here inside After Effects. So I can close that down. Here are my images. Here's the main comp. There are other comps that you won't work with, and then there are comps that you can change. So open that up by clicking the disclosure triangle, and there are media placeholders. Open that up, and there are 20 media placeholders. Click on the first one and shift click on the last one. That selects all 20. And then double click on any one of them. And that opens up all 20 of them. You want to work with them one at a time. Now in older versions of After Effects you had a little kind of scroll bar here that you can move left and right to go to the first one or the last one. But in newer versions that's changed. You go to this little flyout menu over here and you pick whatever you want off of this little list here. So I'll go to Media 1. When you do that, the current time indicator might be inside here or it might not be, but you want to put it inside here so you can see this. You're going to cover up the words Media 1 and you want your image to fit inside this gray area. This is just a guideline just so you know. It doesn't have to be perfectly inside there. Alright, so I'm going to go get my first image. So I'm going to close this media placeholders down like that. Go to my images for tutorial here, click on that, and take this first image, which I can preview there. I'm going to drag it right into the comp panel here, like that. And it's going to snap to the middle, right there. See how it kind of stuck there, which is good. Let go. And now there's my image, and I'm done. If I go back to the main comp by clicking over here, there it is. I can change the size back in Media 1 here. If I click on one of these handles, any one of the handles, and start dragging it, it'll change the size. Now obviously we don't want to make it tall and thin like that. So when you start moving it like this, you can press the Shift key and that'll constrain the proportions. If you make a mistake like this and let go, you can recover from that by clicking on it again, dragging it again, and holding the Shift key after you've clicked on it, and that'll constrain the proportions again. So I'll drag it just to the edge like that so I can use the full frame back here inside the main comp. There we go. And notice that it covered up the Media 1 placeholder text and covered up the gray solid as well. You don't have to get rid of those, just as long as you cover it up like that. All right, let's just do that one more time just so you get a sense of how this works. Go to Media 2, like so. The current time indicator is not inside here, so click anywhere in there so you can see this. Go get Image 2 here like that. This time drag it down to the timeline here. If you drag it down in the timeline, it'll place it at a place in time. You don't want to do that. You want to drag it just above the words Media 1 or Media 2, whatever the number is. If you go below it, that's not a problem, but just that the lettering will show up there. If you see the lettering like that, you can just change the position of this image by putting it above it, or simply turning off this eyeball for the media. That turns off the text for the media there. Now you want to change the size of this so you can fill the whole area there. You don't have to, but it's probably a good idea to do that. So you click again on one of these handles, drag it around, hold down the Shift key until you get it to the size you want, like that. Go back to the main comp again, take a look at that, and just drag this forward, and there's that next image. You're noticing some color kind of being thrown into it and some other things put along the side there. We'll talk about those textures and those colors a little bit later. Now what happens if you have a vertical format image? I'm going to go to number 20 here, by clicking over there just to have that lined up so I can see it. I'm going to go to Media 20 over here, so I click on this little chevron there and go to 20. I'm going to put an image there that's vertical format, this one here with the waterfall. So I'm going to drag that again inside here like so. Wait for it to snap like that. There you go. And I could leave it like that. But this gray will show up if I go back to the main comp. So I need to go back to the main comp by clicking the chevron, going to main comp here. You'll notice the gray showing up behind that. You don't want that. So go back to number 20. And we'll get rid of the gray by just turning off the visibility by clicking on this eyeball. The Media 20 text is covered up by this, so it's okay. You can leave that alone. If you want to change the size or the position of this, you can drag it around like this. You can change the size again by just dragging the corner or one of the other handles and dragging it and holding down the Shift to constrain it. So you can kind of get closer if you want to like that. You're not stuck just keeping it in one place. You can move it around. Let's go back to the main comp here and take a look at that. There you go. So that works out okay. Now you want to change the text here. You can change the text on all 20 things. So I'm going to turn off all of these other little media placeholders here. I do that here in this new version of After Effects by just clicking on this menu here and saying close other panels and group. If you have an older version, you have to click on these one at a time and click on the X one at a time to get rid of them one at a time like that. But I'll click on this one here, click on the little menu and say close other panels and group, and that closes them all down. I'm going to go up here to the U change to the text placeholders. There are 20 of those, text 1 to text 20. Shift click on the 20. Double click anywhere and it opens up all 20 across the top here again. I can go to number 1 by clicking the chevron, going to 1. Putting my current time indicator right there where it says edit text here. It doesn't have to be exact, but what happens is that this text is animated. So you want to have it go where the animation is done, right about there. To change the text, just double click on the text line. You can see it's a text line because it has a T in front of it there. Double click on it. And it turns it red like this, which means you can type anything you want now. Something like that. And then just click away when you're done, and you've now put that in there. If you want to change the font, just double click on the text like that. Go to the character panel here, and you can change the font to any font that's on your system. If you want to change the color, you want to do that here in the color control. Click on the color control layer there like that. And you want to go to the effect controls panel. Now if you're working in the standard workspace, the effect controls panel might not show up here. If it's not there, go to Window, Effect Controls, which is down here, and click on that. But I have it right here. And you see that there's a text color and a lines color. Now it might not be open like this. It might be closed like this when you see it for the first time. So open this up to text color and click on the color swatch. And you can change the color if you want to. You don't have to. I'll change it to a light yellow like that. And you can change the color of the lines as well. So go to the lines color here. Click on that little swatch. We'll change that to something else as well. Something like that. And I'll go back to the main comp, which is right over there. And you'll see that that will show up. There's that text showing up right there. And you do this on a per text placeholder basis. Now what about placing the text here and also sizing the text? You do that inside the scenes comps. So I'm going to close these comps down by clicking on this little menu there. Go to close other panels. And go get those other ones. Go click on project. Close this down. And get the scenes. Again, you can open up all 20 if you want to. I'm just going to open up one by double clicking on that one. And there you can see the scenes with lots of lines here. Because there's so many 3D things going on here, they show up with these little lines. So you won't see that in the final project. Take your current time indicator to this marker here so you get a sense of sort of the ending result of how large this text is going to look. And if you want to position it, you just click on it to make it active like this. And you get this box around it with these little controllers there. Now right now I have my type tool selected, this little I-beam there. So go back up to the selection tool here. And you can drag this up or down. And you can see how it has that parallax feel there. And I don't recommend you want to drag it left or right depending on its original position. Because of the 3D aspect of this thing, it'll go back in the distance like that. So I don't recommend you do that. If you're really adept at After Effects, be my guest, you can do that. But for folks who are relatively new to After Effects, that'll be a problem. If you want to change the scale of it, you can do that by clicking on these box handles here, dragging them, and knowing that you press the Shift key to constrain the proportions, like so. I go back to the main comp, and you'll see how that works. There it is, like that. Now you can change the text for the intro, the outro, and some text related to the logo at the end. So go back to the text placeholders. There's intro text, outro text, and also a website text. So just double click on intro text, and you can change that text by double clicking on it just as you did before. So my photos. Double click on outro. Double click on this. And you can't see it because the current time indicator is not here, so just click anywhere there and you can see it now. Double click on it and type in something like, thank you, the return for watching. And if you go take a look at this back in the main comp, go back to the intro, there's that one. Go to the outro text, there's that one. Then at the end you can put a logo in if you want to. I need to import a logo, so I'm going to double click over here in the empty space. I have a logo here, import that. I want to go and replace this little placeholder here. So I go down to your logo here. It's a separate comp inside the UChange folder. Double click on that. Drag in my logo for that, like here. And turn off the text by clicking on the eyeball for that. And I can change the size of the logo here. I've got my type tool selected. So I need to go back up to the selection tool by clicking this little arrow. Drag the corner here. Hold down the Shift key to constrain the proportions, like so. And fill the screen with it like that. If I want to. You don't have to fill the screen. Go back to the main comp here, go to the logo, and you see that it's covering up this text down here. That's the website address if you want to use the website address. So you can fix that. It's easy to do. Go back to the text placeholders, scroll down to the bottom, and there's the Your Website placeholder. Double click on that. You can type in your website here, but you can also change the position simply by clicking on it and pulling it down like this. If you want to keep it in line, hold on the Shift key, that'll keep it lined up. And go back to the main comp and you'll see how it goes down below there like that. There are a few more things you can change. Here inside the main comp, you can click on the control layer here and go to the Effect Controls panel. And there are two things you can change. You don't have to have the particles if you don't want them. The particles give it this kind of parallax feel. I'll go back to this image here. little particles floating around here. You can barely see them, like snow coming down. But they are large close to the camera and small farther away, and they move in a parallax fashion. So they do give it this kind of 3D parallax feel. But if you don't want them, you go to Particles and just turn them off. Uncheck the checkbox and they go away. You also have the side opacity, these little side textures on the left and the right hand side. You see this text there, and there's one over here as well, kind of tucked away behind that. If you go over here, you can change the opacity. We have it set to 15%. You can increase it if you want. I think going too far here it looks too weird, but you can certainly try that. Or you can turn it off entirely if you don't want those textures there to change how this looks. We like the idea of having those textures. It makes it look, we think, a little bit more interesting. And you can also change the textures. So I'm going to go back to the project panel here. So all kinds of things here that you can customize. Close this down. There are the textures, 4 different kinds of textures, the background and the foreground. Click on the background texture, double click on it like that. And there are 10 different textures. If you just take your cursor and just drag down here, you can turn them all on like that. Put your current time indicator in here, you can see them all. Just turn them off one at a time. The one on top is what will be visible. So you can choose one that you like. These are the things that are used in the transitions. Like that. So I'm going to go back up here, check that one there, maybe this one here instead. And you can do the same thing for the front texture, which also appears during transitions. It's the same set, so you just choose a different one for that one if you care to. The left textures and the right textures are also the same set of textures. There are these black and white things. I'll just turn these guys all on like that. Go inside here. You'll take a look at these things. They really don't make any sense in terms of what they represent, but they look kind of cool when you have them in the background and have them kind of turn down in opacity. So you just choose one that you want there. I'll go back to this one like that, turn the rest of them off. And the same thing is true for the right textures. It's the same set. You just choose whatever one works for you. All right, go back to the main comp here. If you want to add music or a narration to this, you certainly can. If you have an audio file, just import it. So double click here. I have a file here called Visions of Winning. This is the same music that was used in the preview video for this template. Double click on that to bring it in. To add audio to a comp, you just drag it down to the comp here, below these guys or above, doesn't make a difference. And this particular one is the exact length of this comp. The comp is just short of 2 minutes long, and it fades out at the end. Like that. But you might have music that doesn't fade out, so the way that you can make it fade out is by opening it up like this, clicking on the disclosure triangle, clicking on audio, and there's audio levels, and you can go into the place where you want it to start fading, let's say there, and click on this little stopwatch to turn on keyframes. And drag this to the place where you want it to fade to silence. And then you can just click on this and drag it down to -48, or just click and type in -48, and it will fade out from full audio to silence. If you want to use the music that we used in our preview, you can do that. I provided the link to that music inside the Parallax Memories folder. Double click on that. Go to README text. Here's the link. It takes you to this website here, and you can purchase this and get a license to use it. Now, our license that we purchased, this one here like that, allows us to use it in our project but not distribute it. So that's the difference with this kind of license. Then you can use this particular song if you want to, and it can be longer than 2 minutes. It doesn't have to be limited to the 2 minutes that we used in our preview. Or you can find other music that you can use on this website. So now that you're all done, it's best now that you save the project, although you probably have been saving it all along, but you want to save it. And then you want to export it. You want to turn it into a video file that people can watch. Typically, you want to turn it into a video file that people can watch online. So I'm going to show you a standard workflow to do that. Now, you can take different kinds of formats when you export something into a video file, but I'm going to show you the way that I think works best for most circumstances. So you need to make sure that this comp is active, the main comp. Go to Composition and Add to Adobe Media Encoder. And that opens up Adobe Media Encoder, which is a separate program that runs independently of After Effects. And your project will show up here. Now I suggest that you click on this first drop-down arrow there and choose H.264. That makes an MP4 file, which is something you can use on both Mac and Windows, and put that online and it'll look great. So that's probably a good place to start. And then over here you pick a preset, and there are dozens and dozens of presets specifically for various kinds of hardware. But what I suggest you do is you go to Match Source High Bitrate. And you use this hot link to give your file a name, so click on that. And also gives you a file folder location. So I'm going to go to my desktop here. I'll call this one Photos. Now nothing will happen until you click on this little triangle there. And that will render your comp as a video file, and you are done. But what happens if you want to put in more than 20? Let me show you how to do that. I'm going to close this down here. If you want to work with more than 20, you first put in your 20 like this. And then you want to turn off the outro text here. So to do that, you go back to the outro text comp, click on that, and just turn off the eyeball for that. So you're going to end up in the main comp here with just a blank screen at the end, which is fine. You also don't want to have any music playing here because you want to add the music later. So I'm going to click on the music layer here and delete it. All right, now you go through the same export process here to make a video file, and you might want to name it Part 1. All right, once you've done that, you come back into After Effects, and then what you want to do is add the number of extra images to take it up to whatever number you want to have. So let's say you just want to add 2 more, and then you want to add images just to the last 2 placeholders. And then you want to make sure you turn on the outro text and the logo and the website at the end. Instead of exporting this entire file, you take the work area bar here, this thing right there, and drag it to right before the place that you're going to add the 2 new images, right about there. You'll export this area only. So when you go to Composition, Add to Adobe Media Encoder Queue, it'll then make a video only of that section. And then you want to piece those 2 things together. So I'll show you how to do that. I'm going to close down this project, File, Close Project, and I won't save it, just in my particular case. And now I'm going to start from scratch here. So I'm going to double click here inside the project panel, and I have 2 dummy files here that I set up for this purpose. They aren't really exports of a full project, they're just still images that I exported. So I'm going to select both of them by marquee selecting those 2, clicking Import. They'll both be active like that, but if they're not, if it looks like this, click on one and Control or Command click on the other like that to make them both active. Then drag them down to the new comp icon right there, that little film strip thing there. And you'll be asked if you want to make a single composition. The answer is yes. You want to sequence the layers, meaning one after the other, and you want to overlap them because that automatically adds keyframes. So click on OK, and there are those 2 files. In this case, I have the intro, I've got the first, let's say 20 images, something like that, and then just that blank spot like that. And then I go to this next one here. I'm going to turn off visibility for this top layer here. Then I go to this next one I made, which starts with the last 2 in this case. I managed to turn off both at once. There you go. One at a time. There you go. And then I have this next one, which has the other images, the last 2 with the text. Then it has the outro and the logo. So I want to have this top one dissolve to the second one. So I turn that back on like that. When I go to the place where I want it to dissolve, right there we'll say, I'll just drag this to the left a little bit like that. I'll take this next one and drag it underneath it like this. Something like that. I want to go from one to the next. If I click on this first one and press T, the letter T for opacity, I'll see the opacity keyframes that were added when I made that cross dissolve when I set this thing up earlier. If I click on the word opacity, that highlights both of them, and I can drag these left and right. So I want the keyframe on the right to complete its work right at the end there. I want to drag this left a little bit like that so that when it starts dissolving, it shows the one below it. And it'll dissolve from that gradually to the next one, and then the next one will continue on from that point. And then you want to change your work area bar so it goes to the end here instead of the whole thing like that. If you want to add music now, you can add music. And then you export this using the same routine as before. You go to Composition, Add to Adobe Media Encoder Queue, and do the same routine you did before when you made an MP4 file. So there you have it. That's how you work with the BlueFX Parallax Memories template.